Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Oh, good. That went away. That beautiful tune and the dance that goes with it is Golden Green. The composer is Jonathan Jensen. The choreographer is Philippe Callens, who we are honoring tonight. The musicians are John Berger, Jonathan Jensen, Shira Kamen, and Rebecca King. Thank you for joining us. I am Darlene Hamilton, and we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society. On our team tonight, we have Lindsay Verbal assisting with the program, handling media and our attendee questions. Thank you. And Reed Wilson, monitoring Zoom for questions and posting. Hi, Reed. And Larry Hansen, monitoring Facebook live chat for questions and posting. Though tonight's web chat is somewhat different, we invite you to post questions in the chat boxes on both platforms. We will pick them up and bring them into the after talk and see if we can answer as many of those as possible. Do join us for the after talk. If you registered for this, you've already gotten the link for that. Otherwise, we will be posting towards the end of this show on both our platforms. And as always, thank you to Karen Axelrod and friends for In the Moment concert every Tuesday. We truly appreciate your beautiful music. Let me just say tonight is definitely a little different. We started the 5 Things web chat with the idea of staying connected as a community to learn from each other and share and discuss our love of English country dance during this time when we have been unable to gather together. Tonight is about that, a legacy left by someone who touched our world and made it better. Philippe Callens was a dancer, a choreographer, a caller, a teacher, and a dear friend to the many who knew him. His passion for dance shined wherever he went, and throughout our things, our stories tonight, you will learn more about his love for this common bond we share and the legacy he left to us all. Each guest tonight has selected a special piece of music to begin their thing with as part of this legacy given to us by Philippe. First, we have Allison Thompson, dance historian, editor, and musician, greatly admired Philippe's meticulous dance reconstructions, and she joins us to present thing number 1, history.
Thank you, Darlene. Beautiful tune, Alice, one of my favorites. I'm going to give some background on Philippe and his life to provide the basis for other people to provide more commentary on his dancing, his choreography, his friendships, and his relationships with music and with dance. Lindsay, could we have the first slide, please? Philippe lived in the town of Mortsel outside Antwerp in Belgium. And just to remind us all where Belgium is, there we have it at the top of France and below the Netherlands and next door to England there. He started in the world of folk dancing through the Belgian youth movement in the summer of 1975 at the age of 13. And the bug must have really bitten him hard then, because that fall he joined a folk dance group and soon started a 3-year-long course in how to teach folk dancing. And I'm sure we would all love to know what the curriculum of that was. At the age of 17, he taught his first dances. By the early 1980s, his interest had shifted from international folk dancing to the dance traditions of England and of North America, in which he found, as he wrote in the foreword of one of his books, the social aspect of dancing that he was looking for. And here I want to say that I've been told that in Belgium in the 1980s and the 1990s, in general, there was not much interest in non-Belgian dancing, so that Philippe's passion for and promotion of Anglo-American dance was really revolutionary. In 1985, as a very young man, he was invited by Don Armstrong to be a staff member at the Rocky Mountain Dance Roundup in Granby, Colorado, organized by the Lloyd Shaw Foundation. He wrote that this trip would opened up a new world for him. And here we should say that he started off more heavily on the North American dance traditions than in the English ones that we remember him for in this particular group and forum. He served as staff again the next year, 1986, at the Rocky Mountain Dance Roundup, and was also on staff at the Kentucky Summer School in Berea, Kentucky. And the next year, in 1987, he spent almost 3 months touring America, dancing in New England, the Midwest, Appalachia, and the Mid-Atlantic states. And he wrote in another foreword, "It was the New England style, with its well-phrased and energetic dances and its wonderful music that most appealed to me." His very first book, Everybody's Swing, was published in 1989, and it contained 35 dances that he had collected in his travels. So he was certainly considering himself a folk dance collector. But it was also at this time that Philippe began exploring writing dances, and that resulted in his 1996 book, From a Belgian Yankee Caller, which was a collection of 45 original dances in the New England style, written in the prior 10 years. In the meantime, in 1988, Philippe founded a monthly country dance series in Mortsel, and in 1990, to provide a more solid base for the dancing in Belgium, he, with friends Luc Blanc and Frida van Vlederen, I hope I'm saying that correctly, founded the Anglo-American Dance Service, AADS, to promote dancing from the British Isles and America and to sell books and CDs, and you can find them online and order from them. Frida recalls that when we started AADS, we had no musicians or any financial means to work with live music. It was Philippe who insisted on introducing this. It was also he who first introduced us to foreign callers. The first musician he ever invited to Belgium was David Fleming Williams, the son of Nan Fleming Williams, who had played for many years for Pat Shaw. During the 1990s, Philippe and AADS organized 2 dance weekends a year, bringing in callers such as Larry Edelman, and with musicians Laurie Andrus and Steve Hickman, and Ted Sanella, who became a mentor and friend of Philippe. In Belgium, he was working extensively with live music with Mick Lammers and the band The Little Tinkers, and later with the band Hobson's Choice. And of course, here in America, he was working with the bands A Joyful Noise and Hold the Mustard. We're going to hear more about that later tonight. Philippe was very deeply involved in the makings of any of the CDs or cassettes, because there were cassettes in those days, associated with his books, and you'll hear more about his collaborations later. Philippe kept traveling to the US to keep in touch with what he called the real thing. And in 1994, he taught squares and contras at English American Week at Pinewoods Camp. That was his first teaching at Pinewoods Camp. And he returned to Pinewoods for staff for many more weeks in the years after that. He taught at several of the Mendocino English Weeks. He taught at 2 of the New London Assemblies sponsored by the Amherst Early Music Festival. He was on staff at 3 of the Lenox Assemblies. He taught at many other events and evenings around the country and in Canada. While he preferred teaching at weekends and weeks where he could work with dancers and with musicians over a long period of time, he also did one-night stands, including one here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I am, where he stayed one night with me, sat right over there. And he left the next morning to go visit the famous Falling Water, the house that's about an hour and a half away, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright was one of his many artistic passions. Philippe's first teaching experience in England was at the Eastbourne Festival in 1995. He was actively teaching and touring in Europe as well. You saw where Belgium was located. It's actually quite a convenient spot to get to many other venues. He was working at festivals and weekends in the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, England, the Czech Republic, and I'm sure more. And on top of this, he was holding down a day job as a librarian. I don't know how he did it all. Philippe increasingly turned towards choreographing English country dances, and many of these, as I'm sure all of you know, bear names that refer to dancing friends or to dance communities or events. And we're going to hear a number of these tonight: Autumn in Amherst, Alice, Noisette, and Early Frost, Hortonia, and so many more. Many of these dances are set to tunes composed by Philippe's musician friends, and he was very unique, I think, in working with so many musicians and showcasing so many of their original compositions, and we'll hear more about that. Philippe also researched and reconstructed dances from historical collections, and his background notes on these dances are meticulous and thorough. I always learn from them. In 2008, for example, he presented a workshop on dances commemorating the War of the Spanish Succession. I'm sure you remember that that was from 1701 to 1714. And he presented this at the Second Rothenfels Dance Symposium in Germany. Philippe was, I think, particularly interested in the dances of the early 18th century, not the later Jane Austen period, but the earlier one. In an interview for the English Folk Dance and Song Society News in 2013, Philippe talked about what he found appealing in English country dances, and I quote, "There is the link with history. I enjoy that these dances were done several centuries ago. I love the music in all its wide variety. I like the beauty of the way we can move in the Playford style dances. Through my teaching, it is this beauty that I want to pass on, and I enjoy that it is a dance form that brings people together in a way that is socially stimulating and open. There aren't many other things in life that do that." End quote. Philippe began to experience health problems in 2013, and these increased with the years. In 2018, at the Lennox Assembly, he announced his retirement from teaching and dancing, and that must have been so difficult for him. Then came the pandemic and the lockdown. Isolated from the dance world and under lockdown, unable to visit the museums and the libraries that he loved so much, Philippe struggled. He took his life in January of this year, and we are now celebrating that life and its extraordinary legacy.
Thank you, Allison. That was great. Thank you very much. We're going to move on into thing number 2. Graham Christian, longtime friend of Philippe and author of Playford Assembly, has joined us to talk about Philippe and thing number 2, choreography.
All right. So thank you, Darlene. And I've been asked to talk about Philippe's work from a choreographical perspective. And Allison has very nicely anticipated some of the themes that I will emphasize as well. So so first off, I want to say as a kind of a background, and you may have heard this, that to remind us how wide Philippe's experience was as a dancer and as a choreographer, that he had really had exposure to a great deal of international dance, a sort of a continental tradition, and that he, early in his dancing and calling career, he spent a lot of time with what we would call American dance, contra dance, square dance, and that all of those things bore fruit in his choreographic work. And there are whole areas of his choreography that I won't have time to address here, but he had an entire repertoire of American style contra dances. I don't have an exact number, but it's probably close to 70 dances that he wrote in that style. There's even a round dance that he wrote, a style of dance that probably rather few of us in this Zoom call participate in, but he did that as well at a certain stage in his career. So he had a very wide range of experience. And although I'm going to be moving in a roughly chronological order from earlier to later dances, I would like to point out that what's characteristic about his choreography is not that it changes dramatically from early to late. In other words, he doesn't go simply from simple to complex or complex to simple or one type of dance to another. But there's a through line throughout his choreography, which I would call respectful allusions to tradition. And Allison pulled out that wonderful quote from his EFDSS interview about his interest in the dances of the relatively far past, but his allusions to tradition also were pertinent to somewhat more immediate past. He gave a class at Pinewoods once about the choreographers that he referred to as the five masters. Pat Shaw, Charles Bolton, um, Tom Cook, Fried Herman, Gary Rudman. Yes, I just see that note from David Millstone. And David, there are actually more. There are more than that. David said there are 40 dances listed, but there are more. So the five masters, and I've been advised by people wiser than I am that a little bit of context about who those people are might be helpful. Pat Shaw, Charles Bolton, Tom Cook, all English choreographers. Pat Shaw long gone, but really kind of the reinventor of the English country dance tradition. Charles Bolton and Tom Cook left us more recently, both of them, like Philippe himself, both creators of original dances and reconstructors of historical dances. Fried Herman, again, like Philippe, but in a different way, originally from the Low Countries generally. So she was really from the Netherlands, and like Philippe, found a home in English country dance, and became a great choreographer in the style. And Gary Rudman, who most of us, I hope, know, still a living exemplar. And other models, recent models that I think Philippe did mention as great influences were living people, Colin Hume, another English, a living English country dance choreographer, and Andrew Shaw, who is principally a reconstructor of English country dances and was a close friend of his later on in his life. So all of those people had material influence on his work. And I think it's probably best for us to take a look at one of his relatively earlier dances from 1988, Gold for the Mailleuse. So Lindsay, let's take a look at that page here. So this dance, as you may or may not be able to see, it's not visible on my screen, but I can tell you what it says, which is that the title is a nod to a particular dance by Pat Shaw, Silver for the Matthews. And I think that here the influence of Pat Shaw occurs not just in the title, but and not in specific quotations of choreographic figures, but in a general atmosphere. So the relative innovation of having the second couple being the strong, the leading couple, these beautiful symmetries at the top and the bottom, which would have been very appealing to Pat Shaw, and was certainly something that he did. There's a general atmosphere in which it's maybe owes a little bit to Errol on the Green, or maybe owes a little bit to Mr. Ganford's Maggot as well. There's something to that. I want to draw attention, because we'll see a little video clip of this, to the fact that very interestingly, the second couple, the twos, walk the same track with different figures, but they walk the same track in different ways throughout the whole first A and second A, that's the second time, and even the first half of the B. They start that track one more time, and then Philippe works in a progression. So without further ado, let's take a look at just one round of this. It's from the Westchester Dancers. Great. All right. So let's move on into Gentleman's Delight. We can go right into that, and I will talk a little bit about that. So Gentleman's Delight, this is a dance in which at the bottom of the description, he particularly pays tribute to Tom Cook, who was one of those the masters that he referred to, one of his real inspirations. And that opening figure with corners crossing and then leading away and leading back is something that he, I would hesitate to say learned, but that was inspired by a Tom Cook dance called Quiet Weekend. I think this is an opportune moment for me to interject that although there are numerous dances in which Philippe exhibited real originality of figure, that he devised something new, that was not what he was after, that was never something that he emphasized in his creation or his description or his calling, that he was interested in the connection to the tradition. So we could talk about, and maybe we will in the after talk, some of the dances in which he shows something really interesting, an interesting innovation like Astonished Archaeologist or the Bell of St. Joe or Somerset Square, some really innovative figures, but he would not have drawn attention to that. So that's a wonderful kind of humility on his part. So let's go right on into Hortonia. Great. I don't expect you all to read and grasp the entirety of this page, but I will simply point out that this is a dance that he describes at the foot of this page as being in the style again of Tom Cook. And there's a little bit something of stepping stones or perpetual motion in these opening figures. I would interject as well that there's a little something again of Pat Shaw in this kind of almost insistent symmetry from the first section, the A1 to the A2, where the whole figure is repeated, changing shoulders, changing direction, changing the way the casts move and so forth. But very, very graciously done. All right, in the interest of time, among other things, I would say, yes, let's move on to Casterton Capers. Great. So one of the things that he also talked about valuing was what he referred to as texture. And this was one place where I feel that he fell into line with Fried de Metz Herman, the Dutch-born choreographer that I mentioned earlier on, that changing the characteristic of the movement. So I'm sorry we don't have video of this, but there really is a very beautiful sort of shift from walking movement to setting movement to the flow of the poussettes, and this very charming figure that he derived from a Dutch choreographer, actually, at the end of the dance, down at the B2, where you stay in line but set to one person and turn toward the center of the set, moving toward your first neighbor, and set with the other foot to that neighbor and turn around again to face your new neighbor. So that's a really beautiful use of something he valued, texture. All right, so let's move on to Westward Bound. This is a dance from around 2002, so we've moved forward about 12 or so years from the first dance that we looked at. So Westward Bound. And this is a dance that is partly illustrative. So it was written for Sharon Green at the time, Sharon and David Green, at the time that they were moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. And this is a dance in which I think the flow and the look of English country dance, which are things that he really valued, and sometimes he talked about how not only a choreographer or caller, but also as dancers, we should value the look of an English country dance, by which he meant not only the values of what the Scottish dancers would call covering, but the overall shape of a dance. I think we're ready to take a look at this dance. This is a clip that includes a little bit of his instruction at the beginning from Pinewoods.
Modern English dances that I've written, and here's one of them. I'd like to say something about its origin, as that may help you in watching the performance, if you like. The dance is called Westward Bound, and it was written when Michael Seaman and Sharon Davy Green moved from the East Coast to the West Coast 3 years ago, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. And the choreography somewhat suggests the long distance traveling across the American continent. Set to a waltz written by Susie Secco, who lives in Western Massachusetts.
Wonderful. Great, thank you. So that was Westward Bound. All right, just a few more examples to show you and talk about. So Philippe, I feel almost increasingly over the course of his career as a dance leader and a dance historian, became enthralled with the dances of the 18th century. So the impact of those dances and their presence in his dance collections increased over time, so that by the time he had in effect finished putting together dance collections, his ideal was about half modern compositions, his own, and half interpretations of historical dances. So one of the dances where his interest in dances of the 17th and 18th century bore fruit most dramatically was Autumn in Amherst. So let's bring up our PDF of that here. So there is a bit of, again, of Tom Cook here in that step and honor. Charles Bolton also loved that figure, and a little bit of English country dances as we enjoy doing it. But this very dramatic central figure, or the climactic figure that we see here, where the two couples end in a line across the dance and then cast like a trust exercise, cast away out of the line to the sidelines and then cross with partner, is quoted directly from a great dance called The Lover's Luck by Thomas Bray, published in 1699. And that's something that is a debt that Philippe acknowledges in his notes. So beautiful reinvention of that tradition. Some of us on this call know the dance well, so we won't have a video quotation of that. So let's move to one last dance. Let's bring up the PDF for The Costumer's Delight, which I think is maybe the next to last dance that he completed. As far as I know, it was the next to last dance that he completed. So here in the notes, here in the notes to the dance, he pays tribute to Andrew Shaw's interpretation of a dance of the early 18th century, Deal Take the Wars, so which features these long casts and these diagonal crosses here. Philippe reinvents this series of figures in a very interesting way. Of course, the meter has changed, the form of the dance has changed, so that we've now moved from one particular kind of long way set to this tight three couple dance. And I think that it's a very good example of the benefit that Philippe could derive from historical example, how in being invested in these older dances, both of the immediate generation preceding him and hundreds of years earlier, could bear fruit. So let's take a look at one round of The Costumer's Delight from 2018. Wonderful. So my time is about up, but I will say in closing that Philippe wrote both collected and uncollected and some unpublished, as by my count, 72 original English country dances. And about 50, and I don't have an exact number for that, and about 50 interpretations of historical dances, and many of those are still also uncollected. And I think that the tribute that we can pay to all that labor and creativity is to dance the dances.
Thank you, Graham. That was great. Next up, Barbara Greenberg has known Philippe for over 20 years, playing for him and recording music to his dances with her bands Hold the Mustard and Joyful Noise. Joyful Noise. Thing number 3, musicians and music.
Thank you so much, Darlene. And thank you, Allison and Graham, for wonderful introductions to how do we illuminate the music for this wonderful person's compositions. I am so honored to be part of this presentation, and I'll speak about the 22-year relationship that Hold the Mustard and A Joyful Noise had with Philippe, and at the same time humbly speak for the many, many musicians he worked with who greatly respected him and loved him. I'll also share with you some of their memories and stories in the aftertalk. Later in my section, I'll talk about Philippe's relationship to music and the pieces that he chose for his English dance compositions. The picture you saw was of Hold the Mustard, who are Paul Prestopino, Kathy Talvity, Daniel Beerbaum, and myself, And for the record, A Joyful Noise is Kathy, Daniel, and myself. And while the bands look almost the same, they were formed 11 years apart. In 1998, we finally met Philippe in person. A Joyful Noise was invited to play for an annual workshop in London, Ontario, run by True North Music and Dance. Former CDSS director Tom Cease and his wife Anne were stalwart members and founders of that group. Philippe had sent us a great deal of music that we had never seen before. And of course, there were a lot of his original compositions and reconstructions. We were really anxious to see what the dances were like, and certainly what it was like to work with Philippe. Well, within a half hour of the first workshop on Saturday morning, I remember turning to Kathy, and we just both we dropped our jaws. We knew we were working with a dancing master. His scholarship and research was so evident. His own dancing was such a precise and beautiful, beautiful example. He aimed to raise the dancers' skill and style levels higher than their own expectations. And even in that short time, he was helping them do that. He worked with us very clearly and with a good sense of fun and discovery together as the whole weekend went on. It was a wonderful and meaningful artistic collaboration, and the first of many to come. It was always a delight to be on the bandstand with Philippe. He had his senses wide open. He had awareness of everything going on the dance floor and between the music and the dance floor. He was always listening to the music. We could feel him connecting to us like a teammate. We enjoyed his mixture of professionalism and humility. He was always meticulously prepared. But if he was teaching a dance or telling a story of the inspiration of one of his dances, sometimes his very good English might desert him, and he needed a Flemish or Dutch word to make his point. But he was willing to make fun of himself when this happened. He could be surprised, too, and amused by something that happened on the dance floor. He would turn to us during a gig and just say, "Did you see that?" Here we are at one of the gigs with Philippe, and as you can see, Kathy, our pianist, is watching the teach. I think the rest of us have our ears on the teach, but I obviously am saying something to the guys on the other side of the bandstand. But if we're playing for a dance, and it's especially when there's something new to us, he made sure that we understood the kind of stepping and phrasing to the dance. He danced the figure on the floor, looking at us to be sure we were getting it, and singing the tune if we hadn't started it up as yet. He wanted us to understand the type of energy and the textures in the dance. If it was a dance we knew, he would sometimes just dance and sing up at the bandstand. But if we needed a tempo, he would come up right in front of the bandstand, and he would go, well, let's say that last tune, and he would just be a metronome and sing with this boop sound. And that's just etched into my heart forever, how he did that. Every event was a memorable one with Philippe, and these collaborations were things we always looked forward to. So we have a photo, again, from that same gig, and this was taken at our last dance together in Princeton, July 14th, 2018, as he was winding up his American tour and retiring from calling. I think he was heading up to New England for the New London, and then maybe one other before he headed home. Another legacy of Philippe's are 5 recording projects that he initiated. During his American phase, he twice contacted bands asking us to use cuts, and he would compile these, and they went to 2 different contradance collections that he was publishing. One's called Everybody Swing, and one is called Keep On Swinging. In the early 1990s, he contacted us for some tracks from our contradance album. And that was how we first met him, but it was only through email. But Philippe, during this American time, was really anxious to find musicians closer to home. So in 1990, he attended the Christmas course at the Dutch Folk Dance Society, where he heard the band The Little Tinkers. They were performing English country, Morris, and American squares. He made friends with the band members and introduced them to New England-style music. They loved it and made it their own. Over a 10-year period, he performed with the Tinkers, doing English country and contra, at festivals, weekends, in Belgium, Netherlands, England, Germany, and Denmark. In 1997, Philippe and AADS released Both Sides of the Atlantic, which is a collection of 6 dances that are English and 10 New England-style dances. Again, collections, nothing that he has composed as yet. So that's the cover for the book. And then here's the CD cover. And the CD is made by the Little Tinkers, because they could play both these styles. I just love this cover. So Mick Lammers, the pianist for the Little Tinkers, writes about the band's experience when recording. Mick said, "When AADS asked the Tinkers to record, it was an offer we couldn't refuse. Philippe had specific ideas about what should appear and in which order. He left the arrangements totally up to us, but made many useful suggestions. He attended all the recording sessions, and his presence was stimulating and even comforting. He showed great confidence in us, and the result was created in genuine cooperation." Here's a picture of the band, and I'll identify them during the after talk. But let's hear a cut from that album, and we'll hear the Tinkers playing Newcastle. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Well, I wanted to get out of my chair and start dancing. Well, Christmas weeks are rather magical, and 5 years later, Philippe was working with the Joyful Noise at the J.C. Campbell Folk School in Brasstown, North Carolina. So on New Year's Day, 2001, we finished lunch and we were getting ready to head to the airport. And Philippe said to us, "I would like to make a recording of my original English compositions and also some of the reconstructions. Would a Joyful Noise and Hold the Mustard be willing to make this recording?" Well, needless to say, I nearly fainted. But we were so very excited. So in 2001, we played through a long list of music that Philippe had given us. A number of times we rehearsed and played our arrangements over the phone to him in Belgium. One tune we actually had to change the notation of the rhythm, different from what we often have notated and used, because from his research and scholarship of Baroque music, he found that there was a different way to play it, and he wanted us to play it in the Baroque style. But he had some dances he felt should be included, strongly felt should be included, but we were, okay. They were on top of our list, but we did it. This became the Red Star Line album, released in 2002, and it contains music to the dances in his books Continental Capers and Belgian Boutades. In March of 2008, A Joyful Noise was playing for Philippe in Nashville, and he taught one of his seasons dances. So on the bandstand, there began to be this conversation of, gee, wouldn't it be neat to make a recording of Philippe's 4 seasons? And Philippe got in the conversation, of course, eventually, And we were all of the same mind to do that as a theme for the CD, plus have his more newer compositions and other reconstructions. So with our minds all in the same place, this became the Seasons of Invention CD and book. When we made both recordings, Philippe came to America. We continued our conversations about tempo and feel, stepping and phrasing. He listened carefully and provided feedback. We really wanted our playing to represent everything he wanted to show and communicate in his dance. And we wanted to make him happy if he was dancing to the music. While we recorded, he would dance in the sound booth as we played, although we couldn't all see him. Our friends in the band Bare Necessities and other bands have also recorded music to the dances of Philippe. In the cumulative index in Seasons of Invention, you can see some of those other bands listed there. So from Seasons of Invention, here's a tune called A Trip to the Bar, a great tune by Welsh violinist John Hymas. Philippe used this tune for his dance Somerset Square. Yes, that was a saxophone you were about to hear. I'd like to finish by talking about Philippe's relationship with music and pieces that he would choose. He was inspired by many sources from many centuries. And since his passions were for both contra and English, he sought out music that would be fun and exciting and beautiful. Many of us have heard him say from the bandstand, his encouragement, saying that dance is music made manifest. Philippe looked for music with a good storyline because he knew that a good dance has a storyline. There are moments of tension and release, movement and poise, a private flirtation, and connecting together as a community. He was sensitive to all these things and sought music that would inspire him. Of the 79 published and unpublished English country dances that he composed, the music is almost evenly split between classical pieces and the older folk dance tunes and music written by our 20th century dance composers. His taste in classical was well represented from late Renaissance into the Baroque, and everybody's there, German, Italian, English, and Scottish Baroque. Purcell's used 6 times, Handel twice, and even Mozart and the French composer Darius Milhaud make an appearance. There's music by Turlough O'Carolan, a Morris tune, and even the American march Bonaparte Crossing the Rhine. The tunes from the Belgian and Dutch notebooks are wonderful, sweet tunes, and they can be folk dances themselves or just tunes. But we're dancing to one of those when we dance to La Gave, and also to Darlene's favorite, Gold for the Moose. And these come from notebooks that he would research. As a librarian, he had the opportunity to just research like crazy. And his friend, Paul Orts, Belgian-American, who lives here in the States now, became a good friend when Paul discovered contra and English here in the States when he moved, and went back to Antwerp and met up with Philippe. Someone had clued him in that something's going on over there, so he met Philippe. And that began a 20-year conversation of Philippe sending Paul these scans, and Philippe would just scan tons of pages and send them to Paul. So they worked together for about 20 years on these pieces, and he would chord them and send them to Philippe, and they might get used. But what about those 20th century composers? Well, Philippe used 24 compositions from 18 different composers from England, US, and the Netherlands. John Stapleton wrote the beautiful Noisette we love to dance to. From the US, we have Bob McQuillan, Jonathan Jensen, and Dan Lanier, who did Gough Hall. And many of us danced to that as a contradance tune. And then Philippe took that and put The Astonished Archaeologist to it. And two of the tunes are from Mick Lammers, who, if you look at the notes, is actually the Astonished Archaeologist. Sometimes Philippe had a tune for years before he worked a dance to it. So, for example, I called Jonathan Jensen to ask his permission to use one of his tunes because Philippe had matched it to Marble Bridge Rose and we were about to record it. And he did not know what this tune was. It didn't have a title. And he couldn't remember, who did I compose this for? Where was I when I composed this? He was baffled, and I sang it to him over the phone. He eventually remembered, thank goodness, even though it was untitled, and gave us permission. And the tune for the Dance Autumn in Amherst was written by our pianist, Kathy Talvady. It's titled The Red Star Line because she wrote it as a thank you to Philippe and the band right after making the recording. She recorded it on a cassette and mailed it to Philippe. Soon after, he took a trip to New England and later told Kathy that this cassette was the only music he had to listen to as he drove around. He listened to it over and over and conceived of the dance while driving and listening. So as I close with my thanks, let's listen together to this piece and in our mind's eye, see Philippe driving through New England, listening to this heartfelt music and imagining a dance where he could make this music become manifest. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. That was really wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. Thing number 4. Brad Foster, English and American dance teacher, former director of CDSS, past program director of CDSS Weeks, current program director of New London Assembly, has worked with Philippe since 1994. He's coming to us for thing number 4, leadership.
Well, that was a cut from the Little Tinkers, another cut from the Little Tinkers, from the CD that Barbara mentioned earlier, Both Sides of the Atlantic, and they were playing Macamoyle Reel. I wanted to start showing his American stuff. That was so much a big part of Philippe in the early days. Let's start with a photo of Philippe taken by David Green at Mendocino in 2009. As has already been said, Philippe started out in the contra realm, starting at dances, publishing books and cassettes, traveling several times to the US to take part in American dance events, all of which was before I knew him. There was a huge amount of his leadership in those early years that I only know about in small pieces. Here are some comments from David Millstone from Lebanon, New Hampshire, that describe this side very well. Philippe's interests were broad. He had a deep grounding in New England contra and square dance, as well as English country dance, and was highly regarded as a caller and a choreographer by Ted Sanella, with whom Philippe formed a deep friendship. Philippe also enjoyed his time visiting a gathering of the Lloyd Shaw Fellowship in Colorado, and there's footage of him enjoying a workshop of traditional Western squares, led in Belgium by Bill Lichman. I first met Philippe at CDSS's English and American Week, led by Laurie Andrus in 1994. I was there as executive producer, so to speak, in my role as director of CDSS, but I was also there on staff. I remember being captivated by Philippe, his youth, his passion and drive, his accent, and his teaching style. One thing I noted was his teaching of a figure and its transition together, as if the transition was a full part of the figure rather than a bridge to something else. He would say in his very measured way, you do this and you do that and you do this other thing and then you face the next, without mentioning that facing the next was a transition moment. I didn't think of things in that way. This was truly eye-opening for me at that point in time. Although he continued to emphasize ending positions all his life, I felt like his style of doing so changed and that those points became more deliberately emphasized. So I have a second photo now, another one by Philippe by David Green in the dining hall at Pinewoods, sitting with Helena Cornelius. Back in 1994, I also noticed Philippe's careful and sparse use of words. Here are some comments from Sharon Green of Oakland, California, that captured this very well. I remember the way Philippe would stop his teaching and unselfconsciously stand there, figuring out how he could make his point clearly in English. He was unbothered by the fact that we were standing around waiting. To him, the important thing was that we would understand how to make the dance come together, even if it took extra time to achieve that goal. It was always worth the wait. I've always felt that brevity is really a really important tool in teaching. Philippe is my model of the best and most skillful teacher at using brevity and concise instructions. I wish I had that level of talent. But in some settings, I find a multitude of the right words as an important tool as well. More to the point, I've long envied Gene Murrow's skill with his masterful use of language, his ability to paint fascinating pictures, to tell a captivating story about a dance, and to weave all that into his teaching. In 1997, with that image of Philippe's brevity and Gene's beautiful weaving of words, I hired them both. I hired them to teach at English Week in order to contrast those radically different styles. I think most people that week missed my point. I think what they saw was just how wonderful both of them were as teachers. The only comment I heard at all really was from Philippe himself. At one point, I mentioned to him my hidden purpose, and his first response was to be puzzled. And then a little later, a day or two later, he said to me, I see what you mean. And I love that contrast. It's like bookends. During that week, I remarked about his careful choice of words and told him what a marvelous model he was. Philippe looked at me, paused, and then he said in his inimitable way, you know, English is my third language. Here's another picture from David Green on the stage in the main pavilion at Pinewoods. I don't know what year that one is. I hired Philippe at English Week and later New London Assembly. I taught at his weekend in Belgium. And I worked with him as a fellow teacher at many other events. Philippe was wonderful and amazing. And he could also be intense and very passionate about dance. He never stopped thinking about dancing, teaching, and organizing. I can remember several conversations where he poured out a list of suggestions for organizing my events. I'd often find myself blown away and overwhelmed. There was more than I could absorb. And frequently my initial reaction was to think but not say, no, that can't work. It was just too much. But Philippe also had a way of making comments that stuck. Comments that I'd mull over for a long time, and I often found ways to make use of his suggestions later. It took me a while. His comments very often pushed me outside my box of what was familiar and comfortable, and I greatly appreciate and now greatly miss his exquisite thoughtfulness. Paul Ross has an excellent story of Philippe's perfectionism. I wish I had time to share it now, and I hope Paul can do so in the aftertalk. Here's a short version. At New London Assembly in 2018, Philippe drilled a select group of people in his reconstruction of I, Me in preparation for a demo. I'll save the punchline for Paul's telling, but now I'd like you to see that dance and the perfection that Philippe achieved in the very compressed teaching time. This particular video is by Paul Ross. Nikki Herbst took another one. They're both up on YouTube. I love them both. And here we go. The first figure of I, Me. I, Me. I remember being in the audience for that. It's a wonderful presentation. Next up, another picture from the C-sharp stage by David Green. We, the English world at large, have splintered, I feel, over the years into thousands of opinions about how and when things should be done. In the old days, we all respected and followed authority, which was very easy back then, given the iron grip of those now past on the repertoire and style. But now we question, tinker, and modify at will. I love seeing forgotten dances given new life and old music given wonderful and previously unheard of harmonies. But I also feel a desire to do some dances with the old-fashioned concept of exquisite and identical timing. I still remember the shock I felt when Philippe said he was retiring from teaching. He said that after his years of illness, he'd been unable to travel or teach as much as he wanted, and he felt out of practice, and he also felt like he couldn't reach his preferred level of perfection. I too seek perfection, although without Philippe's level of intense drive and passion. I find it very frustrating when new elements creep into a dance that compete with the version being taught. I often feel that either version would be beautiful if we all did it the same. I'm not so concerned about whether it's this version or that version. I just want one at a time. I don't like, I've occasionally dropped otherwise beautiful dances from my repertoire because I don't like the way they're done now. It's part of my perfectionism, and I care about them too much to accept the mushy results. One dance that was heading in that direction for me was Philippe's dance Noisette. The beauty of Noisette is brought forth with tight and identical timing, or as I like to put it, when we all agree on the meaning of one. And by that I mean the first beat of the phrase. There are times when I feel one has become an awfully wide target, with some chronically early, others chronically late, and some people just preferring something else. Noisette loses so much of its beauty when we're sloppy or we don't agree. A simple example of this is in the start of each A music of Noisette. Two people lead through between the other two and cast back with a glorious 4 bars of music, 12 steps to take you there all the way, 12 steps, not 10, not 13. It's gorgeous when you nail that 12. Filling the entire phrase is simply gorgeous, and in the big picture of Noisette, this is a very minor point. The mushy phrasing, often done in Noisette, almost made me drop the dance, but then I wrote to Philippe to double-check his intentions. One key point is in the second half of each A, when the second diagonals cross, turn to face, and then all cast one place, moving clockwise around the set. I asked, did he want people to cast on 6, which is sometimes where I see it happening, at the end of the third 2-bar phrase of music, or on 1 at the beginning of the fourth 2-bar phrase? His answer reminded me of Horton Hatch's The Who. That bit, I said what I meant and I meant what I said. He said he meant what he published, and that was to have the diagonals face on 6 and then to cast on 1, the first beat of bar 7. He added that the cast was modeled after a similar move in Wa Is Me, and that he too was very selective about when he would choose to do the dance. I love Noisette. I haven't given up yet. I still have hope. So now I'd like us to listen to one round through Noisette and just think about that. It's not so much that I want one version. I've done 2 versions of this that are both beautiful, but I want one at a time. That's my big request from all of you. Here's Noisette. That's to a tune of the same name by John Stapleton and played by Hold the Mustard on their CD Seasons of Invention. I often find myself in the B part. There's some just gorgeous moments in the B part too. I often find myself thinking and sometimes saying, slow down, don't rush, take your time, fill the phrase. So here's my last photo, taken by Paul Friedman while visiting Philippe in Belgium in 2009. I love this photo. Great photo. I think Philippe was a teacher from the classic mode, someone who set high standards and expected great attention to detail. I suggest we all emulate that. I just love that aspect. Beautiful dancing. And to close out my section, here's some more wonderful words from David Millstone. He put this together, things I was thinking of, and put them in such a beautiful way. So here's David. I celebrate Philippe's creativity as a choreographer, his clear instructions as a caller and as a writer, and his high expectations for those on the dance floor. That said, there are other gifted individuals in our extended community who excel in each of those areas, but Philippe was master of them all. Even more, I appreciate Philippe as a dancer because his dancing was exemplary. If he wanted a dance done a certain way, and he certainly did, then he could show you what he wanted by demonstrating it. Philippe was among the finest country dancers I've ever been privileged to know or to observe. He held himself erect, moved with grace and gusto, perfect timing, and careful attention to partners and neighbors. And, I've got to move my page down, without the slightest bit of affectation. Dances simply came alive in his body, and he provided a vibrant example of what it means to dance at the highest level. And with those words, I close my section. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. That was great. For our last thing, Paul Ross and Philippe jointly led the Lenox Assembly in 2011, 2017, and 2018. By the time their collaboration ended, they were referring to each other as brothers in dance. So here's Paul Ross with thing number 5, friendships.
Thank you, Darlene and Lindsay, and hello, everyone. In April last year, I opened up an email from Philippe that contained this unexpected and genuinely touching aside. By the way, he wrote, do you remember when we first met? I'm not sure, but it may have been on the 8th of April, 1999, after I had made a tour along the East Coast and came dancing with Patrick at CDW Westchester's Thursday night dance. You called. I made some notes with a few of Friet's dances that I learned from you that night. Sure enough, I checked my records, and his memory, unsurprisingly, was spot on. My planned program included 4 of Friet's dances, including the Bonds of Harmony. This part of 5 Things is about the bonds of friendship through dance. Ours took root in 2011 when I invited Philippe to teach at the Lenox Assembly, a weekend in Lenox, Mass for experienced dancers, and blossomed through that collaboration and 2 others at Lenox, one in 2017 in honor of Pat Shaw, and the other in 2018 in honor of the 30th anniversary of Friet Herman's The Friet for All. By the time we'd finished our final weekend together, we would refer to each other as brothers in dance. But what did it look like? What did it feel like, this unusual brotherhood? First, because we shared a common vision of English country dancing, it felt secure. And that feeling of security gave us freedom to have an extensive, truly frank exchange of ideas. Philippe testified to this in a postscript to the 2011 Lenox Assembly, in which he wrote, in the autumn of 2010, I had mentioned to a close friend how much I was looking forward to go to Lenox and to call there. I felt it was going to be a treat, and it was, in an almost unbelievable way. Why? I think all the elements that can make a weekend were perfect, and they enabled me to get the best out of me, and it wasn't difficult to do. The organization of the weekend happened with great care. The music was wonderful, and the band cared to make each tune sound according to the choreographer caller's intention. The hall was of perfect shape, the inn welcoming, the town intimate. Collaboration with Paul was easy and highly satisfying. And more importantly, we shared a common vision and could get that across, and the dancers could feel it. I really loved that part of the weekend. I felt happy, relaxed, and by times somewhat extrovert. This weekend was artistically. Yes, we used that word a lot during the weekend, but can you see why now? very satisfying for me, one of the highlights in my dance life, something to remember for a long time. Thank you very much for bringing me to Lenox. Well, friends give thanks to each other with words like these, but also with gifts. My gift to Philippe was Graham Christian's The Playford Assembly, which he treasured. And his gift to me was a set of 8 linen cards embossed with letters, which when rearranged, spelled my name. He knew that in a former life, I had been a typographer. Then he outdid himself with 2 further gifts, both of them original dances. One we all know about, Mr. Ross's Dance, or The Other American Husband, written in my honor. And then a second dance, a complete surprise, composed in the spring of 2020. In a footnote to this final dance, titled Lenox, or The Second Man, Philippe writes as follows: "Can I, a retired leader of English country dance, still write a new dance, especially in non-dancing times? Probably not, but it did happen. The outbreak of the coronavirus in Belgium necessitated a near lockdown imposed by the government. Confined to my apartment most of the time, I started rearranging and looking through my English country dance books. The last books that went through my hands were the 8 collections published by Friet de Metz Herman. Noticing this wealth of wonderful dances, I was reminded of Friet's dance Crown the Year, written after 9/11, when English country dancing brought people together again. Nearly 19 years later, country dancing will not have this function for a long while, and sadly, many dance events have already been canceled, including the Lenox Assembly. However, I would like to offer a new dance that, when time comes again, will hopefully give pleasure to dancers. In the past, Friet's modern choreography has been inspirational to me. Beginning with my dance Golden Green from 2011, I started playing with chevrons, a movement coined by Friet that I am particularly fond of. While browsing through her book Serendipity, ideas for a new dance easily came to my mind, and in 3 days' time, the dance was ready. Actual brothers share a physical lineage, and figurative brothers like Philippe and me share a lineage too, our deep connection to and admiration for the dances of Friet de Metz Herman. So at the end of his footnote, Friet wrote this encomium to Friet, Philippe wrote this encomium to Friet and the Lenox Committee. This dance, with its conscious reminiscences of Friet's choreography, is gratefully dedicated to her memory and to all perpetuators of her dances, particularly Paul Ross and the Lenox Assembly Committee that organizes the annual Lenox Assembly. Lenox, or the Second Man, with a second tune by Roger Davidson, will be debuted at the 2022 Lenox Assembly to honor Philippe, the weekend, and our friendship in dance. And now it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Philippe's dear friend, Simone Verheyen.
Hi, everybody. Do you hear me? Okay. I'm only one of Philippe's close friends in Belgium and Holland. I first met Philippe in the 1980s at a gathering for teachers of international folk dancing. And we will see a picture here. Philippe is the person with a beard here in the front. I think you've never seen him like that, but he was like that for a couple of years. This picture has been taken in a park in Antwerp, somewhere in the 80s. In the 80s, Philippe started to explore all kinds of English folk dancing. For example, Morris and Sword. He went to weekends, courses and camps in Holland, England, and to the States, as Allison already explained in the chronology of Philippe's life. This photo has been taken at one of the Christmas courses in Holland in 1987. The NVS in Holland is an organization for English country dancing and organizes weekends, courses and camps. In Belgium, we were the beneficiaries of Philippe's travels. He brought all that knowledge back and all those skills to Belgium and Holland. And in 1990, together with Luc and Frida, he founded the AADS, the Anglo-American Dance Service, which became Anglo-American Dance Shop. Now, many years later, the AADS still organizes weekends and workshops for New England dancing, but mainly English country dancing. Over the years, Philippe invited excellent dance teachers and musicians from abroad, and the dance level at these weekends has always been quite high and attracted an international crowd. Philippe also organized a monthly dance in Mortsel, a suburb of Antwerp. Here you see a gathering in Mortsel. Philippe had learned a lot about music for dances, and he passed that knowledge on to some young musicians who became the Little Tinkers, a band Barbara already referred to in her section. In my experience, this band provided excellent music for New England and English country dances. Philippe also wanted to pass his teaching skills on to other people in Belgium and Holland, and he offered them a chance to teach in Mortsel or at special workshops. In Mortsel, with Philippe as my mentor, I taught my first English dance, which was Bare Necessities by Pat Shaw. Regularly, Philippe organized teaching workshops for potential teachers. He made a start with a course that for would-be teachers in Holland, a course whose leadership I took over a bit later. So Philippe's legacy in the lowlands is very clear. How would I describe my friendship with Philippe? We were mates. First of all, we were dancing mates. We went to many dance events together in Belgium, Holland, England, and the States. We enjoyed those dances and commented on them. We were also teacher mates. We shared lots of material, dances, and ideas. We discussed his new dances, and he supported me in the start of my teaching career and later on. We were also art lover mates. We listened to music together, went to concerts, to the opera. We went to art exhibitions. We shared our love for good books. We were walking mates. The two of us went for walks in the country, but we went also with other friends. And here you see a picture of a walk in the Ardennes or Germany, I don't remember. We were food mates. Philippe and I shared meals together, home-cooked meals, but also in interesting restaurants, which he seemed to discover all the time. We were talking mates. We shared lots of thoughts on serious subjects. We confided in each other, and Philippe told me about his friendships, his love life, his dreams, and some of his fears. We were, as you say in English, soulmates, and I'm very proud to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simone, and to Paul. And I would like to bring up all of our panelists now and give a thank you to Allison Thompson, Graham Christian, Barbara Greenberg, Brad Foster, Paul Ross, and Simone Verheyen. Thank you very much for presenting this to us. It was wonderful, and we are going to continue. We have more things to share in the after talk. I want to give a thank you to our 5 Things team, Lindsay Verbal, and in the background, Reed Wilson on Zoom and Larry Hansen on Facebook, along with our helpers, Kara King, Dan Vilter, and Adele Nichols. You can find a link to this web chat and to all our web chats on our website, and they are also available on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Our after talks are not publicly available. However, you may request a link, including to this one for the after talk, because I know it's late for some of you East Coasters and other places in the world. I wanted to remind you that we do have the Dropbox where we post the chat. And this week, there are several special things placed there, including tunes written in honor of Philippe, either while he was living or since. You may wish to visit. So we're posting the link to that. And we're also posting the link to the after talk. Next week, we have Barbara Greenberg back with us. So we are very much looking forward to that. And the registration is open. I wanted to say that we are having donations to AADS via Brad Foster. Please make checks out to AADS. However, Brad is going to receive them all, and then he's going to mail them off to them once he has collected them. So if you do want to make a donation in Philippe's honor, that is a good thing to do. Thank you for joining us during this special program. You look to the night sky and see so many stars. Suddenly one winks and goes out and you wonder why, but you say a soft thank you to the heavens that it was once there. Thank you, Philippe, for the legacy you've left us. And we hope you will join us in the after talk. Our closing tune is a trip to Amsterdam with Hold the Mustard. And we will see you all in 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you, team. Thank you, panelists, for this wonderful program. Thank you very much.